I got my water too, but the cafe is just a little bit closer to me.
Yeah, it hits a little different.
It does. It does. All right. So, peace, everybody, and welcome. I am Vanessa Sujey, the CEO and founder of Gather and Heal. Gather and Heal is a platform that is membership based, very much um, soul led and higher self energy led, in the sense that I recognize that we heal in community and we heal together, which
Yeah.
is slightly different than my education and my training, which is social work, that says, okay, come in, meet with a therapist, let's talk about what's going on in your life. I appreciate that and I love it. I know it works for a lot of people and myself, but there's also components that I know I don't know about, and my clients would, value the experience and the connection with. And so, Gather and Heal has been this spin off of my therapy practice, so that way we can have opportunities like this where I'm good with money, but I know there are people who are better with money and who have different stories that other people can
Mhm.
relate to. So, for example, we had to call in some backup. We got Lea here. Called in some backup. And, we were just chatting right beforehand in the sense of how we just connected, right? And without this opportunity of the internet, we probably wouldn't have crossed paths, which is
Yeah.
just mind
It's
blowing to me.
right. No, it is. It's just like the amount of people that I've met and like actually vibed with. Like there's difference between like connecting with someone just to connect, right, as a network friend, but also there's a difference when you connect. Like you
Yes.
feel the vibration and it's digital and it's just like what world am I in? Because I wouldn't, like imagine us crossing paths across the street somewhere. I'm just like, that would not happen in a million years,
Right. Right. And so I'm so grateful for our platform, Gather and Heal, and as we're growing and developing, just bringing in more Black and Latinx women, so
Yeah.
that way we can really just recognize that the healing in community and doing it together is magical, and it unlocks so many other layers within us and around us that I'm just so excited to be able to continue doing, and in different ways connecting with people in events and our panels. So I appreciate you, and I
Thank you.
appreciate people who have signed up and are watching in present time or in the future. Because this
Yes.
this will be on our page and our YouTube, and Lea, please share it as well. So
Yes, of course.
so without further ado, I got a little snippet of your bio here, okay? So I'm gonna read it because I don't want to mess nothing up, because you've been doing your work and your experience, and I love it. Oh, is that a cat in the background?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, what's your cat's name?
I believe this one's Merlin. So I'm visiting my friend, and so that's her. She has two black cats. And so this one's Merlin, and then the other one's Cersei. So
I
if they
love it.
come, they might jump on me, and hopefully they don't press on any keys.
End call. They're like, Leah, you're
Yeah,
done working. It's
they're
Sunday.
like, yeah.
Oh, I love animals. I have a dog. Her name's Nala, so she's probably floating around the
Oh,
house. But all right. So Leah is a daughter of Salvadorian immigrants, queer, first generation Latina, entrepreneur, master of finance, wealth coach, CEO of Mi Riqueza Collective and Mi Riqueza podcast. With over 6 years in the financial field, she has taken roles in management, investment banking, and financial literacy education. Leah now works to protest the financial system. Yes, that was my ad lib, y'all. By making money conversations transparent and accessible, and on a mission to bridge the gap between BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities and wealth. Woo, all of that, all of it, chills. Mm. I also like to just leave some space if you want to share a little bit more about yourself, your background, what we just covered before we dive into the question.
I mean, my identity in itself is like a whole breaking of traditions and taboos. I'm like, when you read that, I'm like, I'm queer, I'm Latina. What the fuck? I'm a first
Yeah.
gen. I talk about
Yes.
money. What?
Yes. All of it. And it's so dope, right? Because the fact that we are really in 2021, coming up on 2022,
Oh
and
God. Yeah.
there are so many firsts within all of these identities, all of my own identities. It's just like, no, why do we still have so many firsts?
Yeah.
But we do, and I'm embracing it. Sounds like you're embracing it, which is a beautiful thing. And that's how we can continue to elevate it. So that way, there are more of us to come that are like, yes, I'm queer. I talk about X, Y, and Z. I am first
Mhm.
generation this, and we are doing this, and we are breaking all the damn stupid standards. And we are out
Yes.
here just doing a damn thing. So,
Yes. Amen. Amen. Snap, 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 snap.
all of it. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your money story. And I'm sure, kind of like intertwined with that, we'll hear a little bit of your family's money story and kind of how this journey has brought you to where you are today to saying, fuck all of these stupid standards. I'm going to break off. I'm going to do my own damn thing.
Yeah, let's see. So let's start with the family because I think that the family will coincide with my own money story. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like I'm a daughter of immigrants, right? So I'm first gen, their first daughter. So
Mm.
there's like that older daughter pressure. And growing up, like if I go to my earliest memory of money, it was around when I was like 12 years old, post 2008 recession
Mm.
where you know my parents used to talk about money in their rooms by themselves. They would let me know only about what's the safe to the password or the password to the safe or what's where their socials are and everything because also they were immigrants at that point and so they're like this is where all our
Mm-hmm.
information is, where it is. I'm like okay, like
Mm.
that's my responsibility. And I think once the 2008 recession happened, my parents are entrepreneurs. They own their own business, their landscaping company and pool company that they've now run in where I grew up in Southern Utah. And, the whole 2008 recession came to be because of the real estate crisis and, investment banks taking advantage of mortgage loans. And, it was this whole unethical practice going on is what triggered 2008. Okay. So this is a little background so you understand why 2008 is a little effed up. It's not like the pandemic recession. So which is also effed up, but different. So when I was growing up, their business was tied to this real estate and everything just started slowing down. No one was building anymore. No one could afford to build. People were losing their homes and my parents were losing business. They were increasing their debt. I just remember, fighting for water, like showering. So like the water would turn off at a specific time. And me and my siblings were like, all right, let's go. It's 6 a.m. Let's get in the shower before they come at like 8:30. And we would all fight for water. And then I just remember like my mom saying, all right, well, the gas is about to get turned off. So whoever gets the first 5 minutes of hot water is lucky. And it's just like, these moments in my childhood, it didn't really have to do with money, but it did, right? Because I'm actually feeling it. Like there's a scarcity here. Um, and then it came to food. And then my mom was like, all right, Lea, like this is the real deal. We're going to go to the food bank. We're going to pick up some food and bring it home. And I'm like, we've never gone to the food bank because my parents, I think growing up, they were pretty well off, meaning in the middle class because of their business. And we were in a booming city. And my dad was like one of the only Latinx landscapers. So they would only hire like, him. So once it started getting more diversified from a company perspective and what he did, there was just not enough work for all the companies that were starting out. And I just remember, my dad telling me, things are about to change, Lea. I need you to read these documents because we were trying to get help to see if we could save our home because we had a brand new home that my dad had purchased, had a variable interest rate. which means that the interest rate changes. So instead of a fixed home loan that you get is 3% or 4%, ours was constantly changing based on the market. And that's why I knew my parents were they were impacted by the recession, because they were if I were to give you some background, they targeted Latinx and people of color and lower income individuals with these loans so that they could default on them, meaning they'd miss a payment. So they kind of strategically did this, right? This is them, meaning mortgage providers and loans and banks. Okay, it comes from top level. But anywho, so my dad had told me, hey, Lea, we're have to foreclose on our home. This is after a few years after the recession. It wasn't exactly the 2008, it was post aftermath, right? That's usually when the community feels it. So like, the community is now are feeling the recession because, 2020, so 2021, 2022 and forward, you'll feel more of the bigger impact. And so my dad lost literally everything. He's like, we're foreclosing our home, we're filing for bankruptcy. And he had to tell me that because obviously I would be the only one who would understand. I was the eldest daughter. I was only 12 years old. And he was like, and this is the moment that completely changed me, that has defined my own money story. And it was like, quiero que seas inteligente. I'm going to say this in Spanish and I'll translate it. Quiero que seas inteligente. Quiero que seas mejor que yo. No quiero que hagas esos errores que estoy haciendo yo en mi vida. And like, he's crying as he's telling me these things, which translates to, Lea, I want you to be intelligent. Lea, I want you to be smart. I need you to do better than I've done today because of my mistakes. Like, I've brought us here because of my mistakes. And I mean, like, my dad's an immigrant. He's not from here. He's from El Salvador, right? He's never got a map to navigate the United States, which a lot of immigrant parents don't. They come here and they're like, all right, we got to figure this out. We got to step in and figure this out. And so my whole identity, right, revolved around them because they would teach me their ways of when they were in El Salvador. So my identity is like, no soy de aquí ni soy de allá, which is very common for first gens and dreamers, because it's like my dad like instilled in me his culture, the way he was raised, the way his beliefs were, and they were instilled in me, similar to my mom. And so like all of a sudden, the one person that I looked up to, the one who was supposed to put the roof over my head, and especially machismo culture, right? A man, if he loses everything, like his ego was broken. Right. And so that was what sparked my seed of the money story and my education, because I was like, all right, I got to take advantage of the system. All right. This is like what I have to do as an adult. Like, whatever it is, I have to be an advocate for my family because no one could advocate for them. No one could step up and fulfill the role of an advocate, of someone just to influence and help my parents. No one could, because when they were in need, only people he could rely on was his siblings. Like, essentially, we became homeless once we lost our home. We had to look for places to live. And the only place we could find was like one of my dad's cousins had a spare room. And it was 6 of us. And so six of us slept in a spare room for a few months until we could find a place to rent, which we couldn't rent because my dad just went bankrupt, right? So like he has no credit score. So it's just like, it was this whole thing, but it was like our lowest moment as a family, but it just went up from there because I then, was like, all right, I'm not letting my family struggle no more. I'm going to do everything in my power, my control, to take control of the situation. So I got into a high school program at the age of like 15, where I can study college while in high school. And I knew exactly what school I was like, department of the school I was going to. I was going into business. I was like, I'm going into business. I'm going to find out where I can learn more about finances, because I don't understand what the heck this is. Like, a bank, investment bank, loan companies. Like, I had no idea what the difference of all of these things were. And I needed to know how my parents were impacted by all of this. Okay. And which for me, if I tie both of it, is, I just kept studying and studying and studying to get the education I needed for finance. And then when I was studying, I saw that like the system wasn't made for us. It wasn't made for people of color. It was created by like white folk for white folk to invest and build wealth. And I'm like, obviously not, like in when the stock market was created and these companies were getting stock and all this stuff, like we weren't in those conversations. People of color were not in these type of conversations. So when I read these textbooks, it all sounds like a foreign language. And I'm just like, it's because it's for people who already have the privilege to understand this language. Like this, like textbooks are hard. If you've gone to college and read a textbook, it's like a whole other thing. Like, you know what I mean? And so I was like, all right, I got to keep pushing. I got to keep pushing for my parents, from parents. And essentially, in I guess once I turned 19, I graduated with my bachelor's in finance. So I did the whole work. I was living with my parents still. And then I was like, all right, where do I go work? Like what opportunities are there? How can I, in my head, I wanted to go corporate. Like that was like my dream, because I didn't come from money and we had rebuilt everything that we've lost, and we're still, rebuilding everything. And I'm like, all right, well, I need to go corporate because at least I can get a secure paycheck. At least I can get secured in that sense. And as I, was applying for jobs, the only one that I got a actual like response back was from Goldman Sachs. And Goldman Sachs is an investment bank. And Goldman Sachs was pardoned by the government for their for their association to the whole mortgage-backed securities, the whole 2008 recession. They got bailed out essentially. They're one of the few banks to get bailed out. And so I'm like over here like having a fucking crisis as I'm like applying for this job. I'm like, all right, this is the only company that wants to hire me. It's going against my values to work for an investment bank because they had part into this recession. They have a part to a lot of corruption. But you know what? I'm not here. What'd you say? Yeah.
Yes. People
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, and it's like, I was like, I have to make this compromise in my life, and I have to ensure that like I level up because I needed finance, like my own financial life, right? I worked at the age of 16. I made money. I made my savings. I started investing the second I could at 18. I had worked and interned at a investment advisory firm. So independent to like what of like Wells Fargo and like all these other banks. These are like small advisors. And they helped me essentially get investing, really young. But then when I was like, all right, I have this only job opportunity because they didn't want to hire me because I didn't fit the culture. And it was because they had a white team and I'm a person of color. So I was just like, I'm over this. But like I was trying to build wealth too, right? Like I didn't have a lot of money, and then I got my job at Goldman Sachs. So I was like, you know what? I need income. I need something that will grow my career, that will grow my net worth and figure out life, right? But as I was figuring out life, I was also adulting, and like personal finances aren't really taught in education. It's more about the investing theory and the banks and their financial statements. That's what I learned. And so I was struggling with my own money because I had a money script growing up, and it was like, debt is malo. So debt is bad because my parents had a lot of debt, and because of their debt, they lost everything. Right. And so I'm just like, my money script growing up was debt is bad, debt is bad, debt is bad. But the first thing that I did growing up was like use credit cards and like shop, and I would pay them off. I was somewhat good at paying off my credit cards at the beginning, but then once I would increase my balances, meaning they're like, okay, you went from $5,000, now you have a $12,000 limit, now you have a $15,000 limit. And it's almost like predatory sometimes because I would get all these notifications, like if I was looking at, Forever 21 or H&M, and all of a sudden it was, seeing all these things, right, of like, oh, your credit card's leveling up, so I can spend a little bit more. Like it won't hurt me to spend a little bit more. And I think spending, the way you spend your money is so important. Not a lot of people talk about it because like that is what got me. like I'm educated in this financial realm, but when it comes to my personal money story, I had $30,000 of debt that I accumulated over 3 years. So like an extra 10K a year, you could say. And it happened because not only, and I'm sure we'll dive into this, but like not only did I not understand my spending habits, nor was I spending with intention, but I also was overwhelmed with my corporate career. I was, working at a bank that I wanted to grow in, but also hated at the core, but also had to compromise a lot of my values, because that's the thing. As people of color, in order to find these corporate careers, we have to like compromise our identities or our values in order to get jobs. Sometimes it's very common for us to compromise a version of us. And I did, right? And so then once I'm compromising in my own identity, and then I'm just like struggling, I wasn't getting paid a lot. Like I think the most I ever got paid there was like $60,000, 61,000. And everyone I knew was making over six figures on my team. So it was just like there was all these big, like from a money perspective, like my life wasn't like, oh, she got six figures, she did this. No, I was growing up the chain. I was growing up to be like vice president, to then be an MD. Like that was my goal and vision when I worked at corporate, Goldman, and then I had $30,000 of debt. But all I could remember, and I realized this recently, that I went through the same struggle my parents did from having and accumulating debt. I had to go through my own version of it, but they had no one to rely on, and I had them.
Right.
And it's kind of weird when I think about my money story and how I was able to pay it off, because I was able to pay off my debt through, I had bought a home. So a part of it was because like lifestyle creep increased. And then like I bought a home, but it grew so like the equity grew so fast in my community because I was growing in like Salt Lake City was one of the booming cities in Utah in the West Side last year. And so I was just like, I made a lot of money off selling my home. I paid off all my debt. But where did I go live? I went to go live with my parents. And now I live with my parents. So it's like when I think about my money story and what happened, like from entering corporate and not spending with intention and all these other things, I was just like, I'm going through the same thing my parents went through, a whole different scenario, like my scenario, my version of it. But like I had a breakdown because it was like my parents had no one to rely on. And then like me, I'm relying on them. Like there's somewhat of a dependency because they told me like, anything you need, we got your back. That's why we work.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and as I sit with this and I tell it out loud, like I've never told anyone that I associated the two, but like, it's just kind of crazy because we go through our own stories, but a lot of them have a lot of inner child within it.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's so much inner child in there that I'm just like still processing sometimes.
Oh, of course. And that's a really dope part about you. Thank you for sharing this part of your story, but like your ability to sit with it, your ability to take that step back and say, hold on a minute. This is how our stories are similar, and this is how our stories are different. And the other piece too, like at the foundation of what you're talking about is, which is why I asked the question of what's your story and what's your family story, because they're so intertwined, right?
Yeah.
And even if we went back, and we're not going to do this today, but like even if we went back generations, grandparents and great grandparents and so on and so forth, their money story foundations trickle on and they show up in present day.
Yeah, no, 100%. They really do. It's like, especially when you're a child of immigrants or a child of someone who migrated to the US, whether, Caribbean islands, whatever migration, right? And especially you're raised by people who had no map to navigate the system. Like you learn exactly from them. Like that's why when I was saying in the very beginning, like my whole identity and like my beliefs were around my parents' beliefs. Like I had in my household, we spoke Spanish, we ate pupusas, we ate frijoles con queso, you know what I mean? Like we were doing all these things, but then I'd go to school and it was a whole different identity. Like I had to be
pizza for lunch.
Yeah, like pizza for lunch, and then also code switching. Code switching is so real. Like
we
I
learned
still
it
get
early.
Yeah, we learn it very early as people of color. We have to like code switch and act like a certain persona in order to feel accepted in environments. I've done it in, corps. I've done it in, I've done it in like schooling. Like I've been code switching my whole entire life. And it's just kind of like, what? And it's hard to deconstruct, because I feel like even today I code switch.
Say more.
Yeah, so I mean, even today I code switch. I think it's funny because my cousins will listen to my podcast and they're like, your voice changes when you talk about something you're passionate about. And I was like, I think you're right. Like, I think I do. And it's not because like I intentionally do it. I just get overpowered by a certain energy. And it's just like the way I speak changes. And she's like, yeah, but like also when you go on lives or like when you're interviewing, because sometimes my family will watch me interview or something like that. And they're like, you like change. And it's like, well, because I'm used to changing. I'm used to like, especially in corporation when you have to present in front of like all white men and you're just like, all right, well, this is my idea. And if I like misspell something or I say something in Spanish and I don't know the word in English, like they're not going to take that seriously. So I have to like really sound proper.
Yes.
Very proper. And I've had partners in my life who, no longer, thank God they're not my partner, but like, I had a partner in my life who would correct my English and would correct my vocabulary and say, that's not how you say this. That's not how you do that. And she was white. And I was just like, who are you to say what my identity is and how I speak and all this other stuff. And so I've grown up in a world where I've had to be two parts of identity because it's different. I didn't grow up in like a very diverse community. My community is majority white. I was like the only brown kid in school. Actually, my best friends and I are all called the brownies because from like middle school, because we essentially had like friends that like she was half black, half white. This other one was Polynesian. She was, Filipino. We all just hung out because our skin color was similar. And no one else wanted to hang out with us. So it was just kind of like, that's the type of environment I grew up. So code switching came to me like immediately.
As you were talking about the brownies, I was thinking about, I went to a very diverse middle and elementary school. And then I went to a private all girls high school. I remember walking into the cafeteria and literally did the scan of like, okay, where am I going to sit? And I found the table with all the black and brown girls. And that's where we sat.
Yeah.
Together, we shared our meals, right? Because we were also the ones who, for the most part, weren't buying lunch at school. We were bringing leftovers from home, right? So it was like a nice international table of having, some Cape Verdean food, some Haitian food, Dominican, Puerto Rican, Brazilian, like, and just sharing. But you're right. It was our bubble. I can remember where I sat at the table and everyone behind me, the rest of the cafeteria didn't exist. Like they just disappeared because that was a space where we didn't have to code switch, right? Like that lunch break was beautiful.
And like you said in the very beginning, community, right? Like you said, like we love to heal in community. You're right. Like if it wasn't for the women that I grew up with that were secluded and suppressed in my own school, and we got together to talk about that, like we had even group therapy together. Like they actually created a therapy for us. Like that is how bad it got. Like we would, you had your table, we would eat in like by the locker rooms. Like that's where we would eat and that's where we would like hang out because we didn't even feel comfortable to be in the lunchroom.
Woo, we could do a whole chat on
on
I'm like, let me refocus here. I love it though. I mean, because it's so true. And we're talking about how code switching shows up in school. Well, yeah, that continued on to
adulthood,
undergrad, graduate school, corporate world, right? It continues. And even we don't even realize it, right? Like how your cousins mentioned, hey, you sound different. I caught that on myself when I was rewatching the video of our event launch. And I was like, oh, I sound different. But I loved it. I loved how I sounded
Yeah.
in that video. Because you're right, it's the passion. And that's what
Yeah.
felt. So,
100%.
okay. So, talk a little bit about, because with Gather and Heal, my main thing is realizing that our mental health impacts everything that we do, and everything that we do is impacting our mental health. So, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about how your wealth journey impacted your mental health, and
Yeah.
how did you kind of like tackle those two, if at all?
Yes, I love talking about mental health. It's also been a big taboo in our community. I feel like, we've been hiding our not only our own identities, but also our mental health identities as well. Like I started therapy very young. I started therapy also, it happened because my employer gave it for free. And I went through a breakup. It was that girl that I told you about that was
Oh, I believe it.
like
Some therapy
teaching me
after
all this vocabulary that I had to like deconstruct all her ways that she put on me. Anywho, I started going to therapy, and as I was growing in the corporate world, I always knew, even before corporate, that there was something off about my emotions, that I was very controlled by my feelings. Also, I'm a Cancer, so that has something to do with it. Like I'm very driven by my emotions. But it would get like overpowering sometimes, where my own thought process couldn't I couldn't hear it, and I could just hear how like my frustration or my anxiety or whatever it might be. So as I'm navigating corporate world, right, there's a identity of me that is essentially like struggling because I'm working, I started working 16 hours a day, or I started working, um 3 weeks, with nonstop breaks, and my manager's asking for all these things. And then all of a sudden, like I'm like put in bed, and I'm like, I can't get out of bed. Like, what's going on? Like, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to wake up. Like, I don't want to do anything. I'm not happy anymore. And I'm just like struggling to figure out what's going on emotionally. And luckily through therapy, they were like, you're not controlling, because that's what people and would say about me, is like, you're controlling. And I'm like, I'm not controlling. I just feel like people don't see my perspectives, and they think, I have this controlling behavior, as what they would tell me. And my therapist is like, you're not controlling at all. You're just depressed and you have anxiety. And when she said that, and she was like, after studying you for like the last few years, and I went to an actual like therapist and psychiatrist, they were like, yeah, you have depression and anxiety. And I was just like, all right, so this is real. How do I like, that was my first diagnosis. I think this happened 3 years ago, so it's not that long ago. And I was just like, all right, so this is what I've been looking for the last few years of my life, even when I was younger. Like, when I would feel these overbearing emotions, it probably was my anxiety, or might have been my depression. I don't know. And when it comes to money, like when I think about mental health and what I was diagnosed with, and like money, it's very common. And even with my own clients, like it's very common to associate our own traumas and our own triggers with money, because money can be overwhelming. Money has its own factor of energy that it's driven by. So like I see money as a tool driven by energy. And if I bring towards it, this negative energy, it's not going to run properly. It's going to bring back negative, like karma, I guess you could say, right? If you want to talk about it like that. And then if I think about it positively, and I'm working towards this level of abundance, right, then it just works in my favor, because I'm coming with good heart. And I'm all about karma, and like also energy as well, because when you think about it, like I had my diagnosis, and the pandemic hit like a few months after that. And or like it was like a year after that. But like I wasn't medicated or anything. I just took the diagnosis. Was like, I'm gonna go to therapy and figure everything out. Like I'll just see how I react after, a year of going to therapy, see if I even need medication. Even medication was a taboo in our community.
I was about to
And
it's so common where people are like, let me try therapy first. Let me try talking. And I'm like, okay, right. I'm a trained therapist, and clearly I know that it can be really helpful, but there's definitely a point, and it's always interesting to hear on people's journey where there's a switch and they're like, okay, Vanessa, can we talk about the medication a little bit?
Yeah,
I'm like,
there has to be. It's like a come to Jesus moment when you decide you want to go on medication, because in our family norms, it's like you don't want to talk about not money, not mental health. Because like when I told my mom I was depressed, she's like, "Mami, tienes demonios," and I'm like, I have demons. I'm like, no, I don't have no demons. Like this is just a chemical imbalance that I have in my brain. And like it was like very foreign for her to understand. But comes to be, I get it from her own mother. Like I found out that like my grandma was diagnosed. My grandma was diagnosed with depression like the next summer after that. So during the pandemic, like she got her diagnosis of depression because she's always been like that, but no one would understand her. And then and so before let me little scoot back a little bit in time. So like when I think about like the pandemic happened and I was alone at home, no family in my area because I live 4 hours away from family. I had my 2 doggies. I was being overworked. I had mental battles with, my previous manager because I had moved teams around the pandemic time because the previous manager, I had actually disclosed with them that I got diagnosed with depression, and he compared me to a quadriplegic. He was like, well, at least you can be as happy as Calvin. Look how happy he is. And Calvin was a quadriplegic. And I was just like, so you're assuming that I should be happy because I'm not like disabled, physically disabled. And I'm just like, you just crossed the line that like, oh, I was so triggered. And so I tried moving away from that team because I was just like, you're crossing lines here that I can't even, like, this man deserves no disrespect, and you're over here disrespecting me at the same time while disrespecting him. Like, no. And there's other things. He was sexist. He was misogynist. He was addicted to control, and it was just really bad. And I couldn't take it anymore. That also had to play. When I got diagnosed, they had told me your manager is one of the major factors of your anxiety and depression because you go to work anxious to
interact
work with him. And so anywho, pandemic happens, I'm on a new team, but you know what's blowing up in my face during the pandemic? TikTok. And like all these Amazon, you can find this, Amazon this, oh, look what I found on this website, look at this outfit. And everyone is like, I'm sad. Like my emotions are very strong. I wasn't medicated at this point yet. And like I'm going through it and I'm sad, I'm overeating, I'm shopping. And, like I must confess, I like talking about this as well. Like during the pandemic, I was addicted to spending money. Like I literally loved the serotonin, the dopamine that I would get from spending, which is so tied to our mental health, like because I wasn't getting it anywhere else. I wasn't getting any happiness anywhere other than shopping. And that is from my money story, right? Like that's what happened and how mental health drove me to these things. And there's obviously other factors that came to play, but like I just needed to spend. And my mom was like, you're just like your father, chillando la tarjeta, sliding that credit card like it's nobody's business. And I'm like, I'm not like my father. I know I got it. I should be able to figure this out. Well, comes to be, I couldn't figure it out because like I was just so sad. And like I think it wasn't until June of last year that I actually sat with my psychiatrist and I was like, all right, you know what? I think I need to be medicated because nothing brings me happiness. And the only thing that's bringing me happiness is spending. And I don't think that's right. And then she's like, how do you feel right now? And I was like, sad, angry, mad. Like I was like all over the board. Like she gave me a quiz and I was like 7, 7, 7, 7, like all like top things of like feeling anxiety. And she's like, how do you feel about medication? And I was just like, I don't want to accept it, but I got to accept it. You know what I mean? Like, it's really weird how like our culture plays into that. And like even with clients that I have today, like their anxieties, their emotions, it drives their spending behavior. Like spending is so psychological as well as marketing for spending psychological. Sorry, the kitty's making a mess over here. But like, mental health drives a lot of these factors. And when I look back, like it wasn't until I could get clear vision of like after medication, I was feeling happier and I was, figuring out, okay, Lea, you can't spend no more. I had to come to Jesus moment with my own financial self. Like I was like, I'm an expert at like finance, but why can't I get the hell out of like get my finances right? There was all these other things like limited beliefs, scarcity mindset for my own inner child. Like these things you can't heal with a degree.
No. Well, and not only that, you can't heal with a degree, but remember, the degree is created within a system that's still not built for us, nor have they updated and made adaptations to how they're teaching and functioning. And these degrees that we have, and I'm putting mine in there too, the degrees that we have in some ways continue to perpetuate a lot of the barriers that are there, right? And so the work that I'm trying to do in the mental health side of things, the work that you're doing in finance, and past panelists with eating and body and just so many different aspects to it. That's why it's so important, right? And that's why it's so important for us to be like, okay, we see all of these challenges and the ways that these systems are fucked up. And like I said, we go through our own version of kind of like stumbling through, figuring shit out. And then we rise up again and we're like, okay.
Yes.
Wealth here, and how they're so intertwined. Because like I said, it clicking that buy button releases for some people that happiness and the satisfaction. Well, it doesn't stop there, right? Then, and people were making a lot of jokes about it during the pandemic, but then there's this waiting period of anxiety of when is this item going to arrive? And then it arrives, and then we're like, oh, we're happy all over again. But the question is like, that money is now gone, right? Like it's spent. And how long is that joy or that happiness lasting? Well, not very long, because then here we go again.
The cycle continues.
Exactly. And we've got to figure out, we have to increase our own awareness to say, these are connected, right? And patterns.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be as well like shopping. I've had, I'm in a class that talks about the trauma of money with psychologists, therapists, activists, and everything. And like many people share, just because money was never in a conversation, that therefore they just do things they blow their money without any recollection, because they don't care. Like they've never associated money as anything, or they have children with disabilities and they see how the system keeps them broke, or they see like there's so many other factors that also play with like mental health and disabilities, and like how if we're depressed, maybe we've gotten in so much debt, addiction, like all these things come to play when it comes to wealth. And that's why when I talk about money, I don't talk about it just like as it's like, oh, you need to save $10 a day, get it done. Nah, I like, yes, do this, please. Challenge you to do it. But also, I know your limiting beliefs are telling you not to. I know the mind, because the mind is so controlling over our factors. And so someone had asked me, what's like the value you bring? What differentiates you from someone else? I'm just like, because I'm bringing the mind and the money together and providing realness towards these conversations, providing real and aware topics about how money has been integrated into our lives, but we've come from scarcity. So how can we remove these scarcity mindset and our own personal traumas that have either come from inner child to adulthood? And how do we take all of that and find accountability and ownership and sponsorship within ourselves in order to build wealth? Because wealth has never been a part of our conversation. Everyone's like, let's go get drunk today and have a good time. Let's go do this. And I want you to. But at the end of the day, what are you living for? And I talked about this in one of my episodes, like money, and my podcast. I was like, money is inevitable. Like money is going to continue to come and come and come and come into your life, because you got to pay bills. You got to buy the drink. You got to buy your life, essentially. And it's like, but no one wants to take accountability for their actions when it comes to money. They'll take accountability for anything else. When it comes to money, it's like, oh, it's bread. Like, you can just spend it like that. And it's like, no, like, that is how the system has kept us broke. That is how the system has left us and bridged us towards, $100 trillion worth of household like income, like that the white people have combined versus us. And we're over here, completely at the bottom of the wealth gap. And I'm like, I need us to start thinking more than just money. It's like I need us to think about like wealth. Where do you see yourself, the vision of yourself? Because I think we can get so stuck on our past and our present that we never think about this future that we want to build.
Because it's scary for people, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, I don't want to get too excited or even think that I have this potential and opportunity. Insert scarcity mindset, fear, shame for even wanting money, right? I mean, I've experienced it too, where I think we had talked about it. I asked her, I said, are you in Rachel Rogers' We Should All Be Millionaires Club? And, I say to people, like, I want to be a multimillionaire, right? Because I do. There's a lot of different ways that I would like that money for myself, for my son and our future generations, and to be able to contribute back to community in different ways.
Right. Yes.
But I'm in my mid-30s and I'm just discovering that shit. Why did I feel shame in saying I want to be a multimillionaire in my 20s or even in my teens, right? I could have had a hell of a head start. And even that's not a head start, right? Because if we think about it, we have our white counterparts who
They're already funding their children. Yeah.
Yep.
Trust fund babies.
Yep. Yeah.
No, but like, I think that's the thing. Like, I'm so obsessed with our cultures and our like inner growth, because when I meet with my clients, like the whole entire journey, like, and it's usually most times we sit for 6 months. Some people want to go longer, but like in 6 months, we overcome like 1 or 2, 3 generational curses. And I think in my realm of work, people want to like, oh, in 6 months, I've increased my salary by 3x, by 4x, because that's like, or by investing or something like that. They have this idea that if you work with certain individuals that you're going to come out winning. I think there's a lot of propaganda in this coaching realm as well, and marketing that says that. But it's like, that's why I talk about it in a real sense. Like when you work with me, like, we go through the journey, wherever journey you're in from a wealth perspective. We start where you're at and we try to work you and break you through the generational curses that you've had placed against you that have limited you to saving, budgeting, paying off your debt. Because that's the thing. A lot of my clients are first generation dreamers or children of immigrants. And there's a lot of shit to unpackage. Machismo culture. I've had gender norm discussions because I have clients who are women are the head households. I have men who are the head households, and they're breaking barriers by like, communicating with their partners about finances. Like it's mind boggling the work that I do, because that's why I say, and I said in the very beginning, it's breaking traditions, breaking taboos of how we've traditionally been taught to deal about money. Like we've traditionally been taught to think about money a certain way, act a certain way towards it, reject it, essentially hide it under the mattress, right? And it's like this generation needs awareness and accountability in order to let go of those beliefs and start acting in the power that they can to gain that financial power that you mentioned in order to change the system. That's what I strive for. I strive for financial power to then give back to the community, to then work with and become an activist. Like if I really wanted to think about it, like my long-term goal is obviously to work in this industry, change this industry, be a part of the change, but also towards the end, like I want to be an activist. Like I really want to be able to fight for our rights, our, LGBTQ plus rights, mental health advocacy. Like I want to be able to advocate for these things that in me have been held in me for so long. Like these identities, these norms, I've broken through every single one. Like my friend was like, because I was talking to one of my money coach friends that I actually met yesterday in person. And I was just like, my identity is breaking a lot of traditions. And she's like, no, all these traditions were placed around you. And you're just becoming you. And you're just becoming you. And all these things were around you, and it's their problem, not yours.
Right.
And I'm like, you're right. I mean, like, my identity, because when I grew up, like, I remember walking to my counselor's office and I was just like, Katie, she was like, or like college counselor, I was like, Katie, I'm tired of being a statistic. How can I stop being a statistic? I hate seeing when Latinx is like 2%, 3%, 4%, like less than 10% and all these data things. And I'm like, I'm tired of looking at infographics about Latinx. And it's like, we're poor, we're broke, we're uneducated, we're unfulfilled, we're all this. I'm like, I'm tired of that. How can I be that top college student? How can I be that entrepreneur running that business? Like, how can I be this person? Because I'm tired of them putting us in boxes and saying that we're supposed to be defined by what the data says. Like, I'm tired of that. I'm so over it.
Yes. Absolutely. So could you tell us, like, what are 3 takeaways for people listening on how they can start holding themselves accountable for their financial wealth?
Yeah. So when it comes to financial wealth, right, we talk, and this is a great space to hold about mental advocacy, like mental health advocacy. And it's like, there's a lot of external factors that play a big thing into our lives today, right? So when we talk about financial wellness, right, it's not about being the richest individual, being, because the one thing that I strive to work for is redefining what wealth really means. Because we've had media, like social media, celebrities, movies, we have all these things that define wealth in front of us. And then we're like, oh yeah, that's what I want. I see that on IG. I want that, right? Like, I want that type of lifestyle. But okay, great. But what are you doing to work towards that, right? So if you have this vision of yourself, these are the takeaways, right? First off, I want you to create a vision. I want you to create a future self. I want you to aspire for more. And you might feel guilty. You're like, well, I'm leaving my parents behind or my siblings behind if I want more. You have all rights to want more. You should be selfish and want more, because we've been having less for generations. So first off, what is that vision of you wanting more? Second, what are you doing now that is working towards that vision? What's in place that is going to get you there? Financially, mentally, physically, whatever it might be, I don't know, right? Because wealth is defined by you. So what are you doing and what are you taking action for? Because a lot of us can get stuck on the past. So my third thing is forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for your past poor money choices, your past life that you've lived, whether through addiction, through shame, through whatever it may be. I don't know. Maybe you've lived a good life, but you've just done nothing about it. Forgive yourself, because we've all gone through this journey on our own in a different scale, at a different capacity. So there's no way that like anyone's journey will be the same. It will be similar because we have different things that tie us together as the women of color, the melanin that we have, or even just like we're connected through our, like we said in the beginning, we're connected through community, right? So we can heal together, right? So if it's healing our past, accepting our current present, right? We've accepted where we are today, but now we're going to take action for tomorrow because we see that vision that we're working towards. That is what wealth is. Wealth is not a number. And I think a lot of people are like, I'm a millionaire. Boom. Yes, I love it. I'm here for it. I support it. But is that what wealth defines to you? Like, is that what wealth really means to you? Sometimes people are like, I just want, like, my version of wealth is being able to spend all days with my kids and be, watch them grow. I'm like, all right, if that's what wealth is, all right, you want to be independent. You want to be financially independent. So how do we get there? Right. Some people are like, well, I want to be a digital nomad. I want to be able to travel the world to do this and this and this. All right. How are we going to get there? Right. So it's really looking at your life from a past, present, and future. And you got to like heal the baggage, accept where you're at today, but also move forward.
Right. And I love some of the ways that you're talking about, because the forgive yourself, the way I talk about it with my clients is, it's like, you got to be gentle with yourself, right? Be gentle with yourself, because the way you are functioning and earning money and spending money and so on and so forth, you are working within the space of your knowledge at that time and your capacity at that time. What you're saying to me now is that you're ready for something different. Cool. Let's give that forgiveness. Let's give that permission to say, okay, I did the best that I could at that point. And now I'm striving for more. I'm striving for better. And this is how we're going to do it. Right? Like there are so many parallels. I love
Yes.
that. I think we had a comment. To your point about wealth, what's a common mistake you see in women of color when it comes to personal finance?
Oh, that's a really good question. When I think about it, I think a lot of women of color automatically feel shame when they just even talk about it, because they aren't like, if we're instilled in us that our man has to take care of the finances, or like, I think machismo culture is so real, at least in my community. And when it comes to my clients, I have a lot of female clients, but the second that they talk about shame, their finances, they feel shameful, because they're like, oh, I know I'm supposed to know this, but like, I don't, like, I really have no idea. Like, I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I had one client mention, she's like, yeah, I was married. He dealt with all the finances, but then we got divorced. And I'm just here like questioning my whole entire existence. And I'm like, I feel it. We've kind of, in our culture, I think they don't believe in women, especially in the Latinx community. I feel like there's no faith in our growth and our ownership. And with women of color, there's so much to unpack with that. Like they, a lot of them, and majority, not all, but like feel that there is some sort of shame that they don't have their shit together, that they just, have been navigating through life by navigating what they should know. And, similar to our parents, there's no map to life, right? So they feel some sort of shame. And I'm like, there is no shame. Like, no man needs to pay for a finance. Like, no man needs to be in control of this. There's no gender norms. That's what I talked about earlier. Like these gender norms that are been in place in us. I'm like, there should be no need for that, right? And then they come with me this shame. They're like, well, I've accumulated debt and I've done this and that. And I, it's almost like like they pity themselves. And I'm like, stop. It's okay. Like, I think almost every woman that I worked with, has this big shame, but guys don't have as much shame. It's crazy. Like I have some guy clients and they don't talk about their money like that. They just, they're like, yeah, I did it. I messed up. And that's why I'm here. Like I need to get my shit in order, accept it, move on. But like when women, like we're just so connected. I think we're just so sensitive to how we live our lives that, we come very, with our vulnerable. I think that's what it is, being vulnerable. We're very open to being vulnerable easily because, that's what we know best. And in community, we heal together. That's the thing, like you mentioned. Like I feel like every time my women clients come up, we heal together in these calls because they're showing up for themselves that they've never done in the past.
Yeah. And that part is so powerful. And I learned that when I started my first company, Sustaining Hope and Wellness, and this was obviously pre-pandemic, and women would come into my office. And I always share a little bit about myself at the beginning of a first session. And in that story, as I share, I say Sustaining Hope and Wellness is a space for teen girls and adult women, because we just need our own space, right? There's a lot of stories and weight and so on that we carry on ourselves, within ourselves. And when you step into this office, we can put it aside because this is just for you. This is yours, right? And so, I mean, the look on people's faces right after I would say that when we were starting this journey, oh, they were like, oh yes. It's almost like I didn't know I needed this, but it's here and I need it.
Yes, exactly what it is. Like most of my female clients, they'll come into a meeting and I always, I was talking about this with the financial community. I was just like, some of my clients come to my calls feeling so shameful about the financial choices they made. And like, how would you react to that? Because the way I react is like, I say, hey, it's okay. This is your space. Let's sit with that feeling for a little bit. Let's embrace that emotion because, when we start diving into the numbers, I don't want them having a panic attack, through looking at finances. I've had clients like get super anxious and avoid me after, a few weeks after our call because of the finances of the numbers. So that's why. And I've learned too that I have to give space for that emotion, for those feelings, for that trauma, for those mindsets to sink in because we've never have been giving that space, and I also love when my clients work with therapists too, because they have I have one client who works, has her therapy sessions the same day as her coaching sessions. So she comes even more liberated. She's like, oh my God, I love you and my therapist. You and my therapist should connect. Money is so important because she will let go of her emotional baggage there, and then her financial baggage will come to me. And it's just kind of crazy how it all plays out. But I really am. I love it because I support, medical help because therapists are trained professionals, professional help at the end of the day. Right. And I'm being trained as I work with clients. I've been doing this 1 year and I've seen so many different scenarios that I've had to navigate. And luckily I'm a Cancer. So the waves, I try to navigate with the waves, I'm just all right, emotions flowing everywhere. But that is what, when we go back to what I said earlier, if I think about who I am and what I bring to the table and my differentiating factors, I hold space for people that have never held that, who have never been able to hold that type of space and feeling and emotion, because I want people to be able to be vulnerable with their finances and share with me their traumas and insecurities of why they got there. And that's why my work is so psychological too. It's I can't obviously give professional and be you need therapy or you need this, but sometimes it's hey, I would highly recommend you let these feelings out with a professional, because I sometimes these I get so overwhelmed with their emotions because they do have so much trauma. And I'm I can only do so much for you, and I can help you from the financial perspective. But when it comes to this other trauma as well, I think you need a professional, and being able to differentiate that.
Yes. Because there's quite a few that are blurring those lines, right? And it's tricky. I mean, we're talking about people and their experiences. And yes, we may be coming from the right place, but we do have to remember what our strengths are. And again, exhibit A, us having this conversation, my strength is the mental health side of things. Yes, I can see how it's impacting the financial, but hey, let me pull somebody in that this is their strength.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I love it.
We're coming up on our time, but there is one more question. See if maybe you can give us a snippet, and or if you have maybe a podcast where you're talking about this already, or if it's to come, we'll make sure to tune into it. But Jennifer's asking, how can we prepare financially for when our parents/elders stop earning an income?
That's a great question. I did make a reel about this on my Instagram. I can share it. But I feel there's 5 questions that you have to ask your parents while they're navigating their own retirement or what they're doing, right? Whether they're close in the age. My dad's in his 50s. So this conversation happens often. I remind him every single month, right? So I always know, as you check in with yourself, right, as a daughter of immigrants, you also have to check in with your parents. We're the sandwich generation, essentially what they call us. We have to maintain a future for our parents, ourselves, and our children. So it's multi-generational wealth is what we like to call it. So the question is essentially that you ask with your parents, how are your finances? What do your finances look like today? It's the first question. What have they come back with, right? Do you have any debt, right? Do you have any savings? What are your savings looking like, right? And then the fourth question is, when do you want to retire? What's the date that you're looking for to retire? If you had an option, what would that be? right? 65, 60, 59, 67. I don't know, right? We have to give them the power to also give answers that we don't define as children, because I feel like sometimes children can be overbearing on their parents and define their future as well. I've seen that. We also want to give our parents their voice. And the last question is, do you want to be here or at home, their native land, right? So like, my parents are constantly like, okay, Lea, I'm going to go to El Salvador when I retire. I'm like, okay, financially preparing for that. And they're like, actually, I want to stay in a farm and build. I'm like, okay, what do you want? Like, do you want to be home? Like, do you want to be here at this home that you're in? Or do you want to buy something in the home native land? Do you want to, what is the plan here? Because then I can take this information away and sit with my siblings and figure out game plan. Be like, all right, once we all, if you're all in corporate careers, maybe not, maybe you have all completely different lifestyles, probably what it is, right? How can we all come together and figure out a like stipend, like saying, okay, like, all right, $1,500 a month we're going to give to our parents because they're going to go back to Puerto Rico or they're going to go back to El Salvador. How about that, right? Life expenses are a lot cheaper in most native countries. And so we can say, right, we can come up with this money. It's just like, 200, 300, 400 contribution from all of us on a monthly basis. We can come up with a game plan. Right. So you have to ask these questions to get their answer, because we can't just assume and we can't just also define it for them.
Those are fantastic questions. And we'll share that reel as well, because it makes it very tangible and concrete for us. And the most powerful part that I love is we're giving them permission to say what they want coming forward. Right. We're allowing them to create what does my financial wealth look like in the future? And we want to be able to support them in the best way that we can so that they can have that. Oh, yeah. I love that. That is so dope. Oh, all right, Lea, thank you so much. Jennifer's been dropping it in the chat, but say it out loud for us. How can people connect with you? How can they work with you?
Yes. So I, on Instagram, I'm Lea Landaverde. I, have that as well as Twitter. That's where I usually hang out, is either Instagram or Twitter. And then I got my podcast that I am, working on, continuously releasing. 2022 is going to be the revamp of everything. It's called Mi Riqueza Podcast. The reason, Mi Riqueza Podcast, redefining wealth for BIPOC and LGBTQ+. Like, that is the podcast. It is because I want it to be a podcast that showcases the wealth journeys of our people. So this first kind of season that I'm doing is just practicing my voice and practicing sharing the stories and opening the dialogue to these conversations. And then in 2022, what I plan on doing is interviewing real people with real stories about their wealth and what they see as wealth. Yeah. So the question, like the main question of my podcast, is, what does riqueza mean to you? So what does wealth mean to you? And I want people to see and hear that every single individual is going to have a different answer. And then that's why my podcast is called Mi Riqueza, because it's my wealth. Like, everyone has the ability to say my wealth without feeling like I'm broke or something like that. Like, no, they can aspire to all these things. So that is like where I'm hanging out these days. And I absolutely am so grateful to be connected with you and talk these conversations and hold space for these conversations, because I feel like we can get into the technical jargon about finance and building wealth. And I love talking about that, but I also love it. And like I mentioned, like, sometimes I don't have space to talk about these type of conversations. And I love these type of conversations because they're real, they're transparent, and they're also accessible. Like, I love that all the events that I was in this week, they're free. And I'm like, yes, like, let's bring these conversations naturally. Let's have them more often, please.
And of course, I had questions about like saving and investing, and those are really important to have. And if we could chat for another X amount of time, we would get to them. But there is something really powerful in each of our stories. And I really do want to have that space and hold it for people who are interested in listening. What can I learn from Lea? What can I learn from Vanessa? What can I, right? And then not only what am I learning, but what else can I share so that they can learn from me too, right?
Yeah.
We're
collectively healing. We're gathering and healing together. Yes.
Oh my goodness. All right. Oh, yes. Jennifer just reminded me you're going to be joining me on the chop up. Okay. So maybe then on the chop up, we'll talk some more about like the concrete financial side of things.
Yes. This is more the emotional, the building, the beliefs. But then, yes, we can get into how to actually put that into place.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. That's landing really well with my system.
All right. Thank you, Vanessa, so much. This was a beautiful conversation.
I appreciate you. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you Thursday.
Yes. All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.